Welcome to the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. I'm your host, Lily Allen Duenas. Together we'll talk about the world of yoga and we'll talk to people from around the world. I wanted to also let you all know that I will be teaching yoga online this year. Classes will be live streamed on a platform called Moxie, and I have $25 off coupons to send you, valid in January. And I would love if you could join me for a class to help you feel centered, refreshed, and filled with ease. Ready to dive into the show? Let's get started. Liina Tael has been practicing yoga for 25 years and teaching yoga since 2007. She received her first yoga teacher training in Australia and started her journey with yin yoga with Sarah Powers and then with Sebastian Puchel and Muriel Bruyel. She went to complete a restorative yoga teacher training with Judith Lassiter. Currently, Liina teaches yoga in Berlin, where she focuses on inquiry and awareness-based yoga, which can take both softer and stronger forms, always circling back to building greater autonomy and agency, self-awareness through tender and compassionate self-inquiry. Thank you so much, Liina, for joining me on the show today.
Hello. Hi, Lily.
So I am so excited to dive into you and your story and your relationship with yoga. The more I read about you, the more I've Googled, the more conversations we've had, the more I haven't been able to contain this excitement. So to kick off the conversation, let's hear how yoga first came into your life.
To be honest, that part was a complete accident, I think. I had a coworker who liked a guy, and she found out that this guy is going to a yoga class. And she basically just begged me to go with her as we were going to go, so to speak, spy on him. So we went to this yoga class that was held at the back of a gym. There was an aerobics class before the yoga class. So when you walked into the room, it was all kind of foggy from the sweat and jumping before there was one wall that was all complete mirrors. And you had this pumping music coming in from the gym that was right next door. And that was my first yoga experience. It happened to be Kundalini yoga, which at that time I didn't know there were different types of yoga. And I just knew nothing about yoga other than after that first class that I kind of grudgingly went along with. I just hadn't felt what I felt before. And so I actually kept going back. That was no longer about spying that guy, but I just kept going for years and years. I had Tuesday and Thursday evenings were my yoga evenings. And it was at a time in my life when I was working in a corporate world. And I think kind of a couple of years into practicing, I had a breakup that I kind of took really hard. And so it was that class that twice a week was some kind of a refuge for me, which I didn't know how to put into words back then. I had none of my friends were coming. No, they just accepted that this is what Liina does twice a week. I was also very much at a mindset of work hard, play hard. So the way I reacted to my then breakup in my early 20s was basically partying hard and drinking and all of that kind of thing. At the same time, my career was on a kind of a fast track, so I was also working really hard. And so it was kind of this weird mix there. But my yoga class was it was like this sacred thing, which, as I said before, I didn't word it like that. And my teacher, I don't know if it was like knowingly she didn't bring a lot of philosophy in, because I think back then I would not have been able to take that in. But it was just, I was just kind of trusting the process. And I remember every time I would drive back home from the class or to a party afterwards, the way I would describe it is I had this stupid grin on my face for no reason. Like that was kind of that first glimpse of some sort of contentment in that very chaotic part of my life. That was not dependent upon like something external or something that I had, bought or received or done. It was just there, and then it would fade, and then I would need to go back.
Oh, that's amazing. I can completely relate to that kind of silly grin on the face, that kind of like melty glue, like melty gloppy glue, that you just feel kind of light and airy, but melty at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to hear, Liina, how you feel that our relationship with yoga and our practice, how that shapes how we actually do act out into the world.
So that has also like over like what did I say, 25 years of practice, I think that has also changed because that those first years, so I think I practiced for about 6 years, doing simply that, just going twice a week, and that was my yoga. I didn't practice on my own. I sometimes tried, and I just kind of it wasn't the same. I needed that group class. But I think back then, what the influence was, the effect, what it had back then was a little bit like a band-aid, but it did, so for momentarily, because back then I didn't have any like self-inquiry tools or self-reflection tools that were given me with yoga. So I did the practices, we did the breathing. If you know Kundalini, there's a lot of like energetics involved. So it kind of makes you a bit high. That's the grin. And there wasn't a whole lot of self-reflection happening, or not a whole lot of self-awareness happening back then. And as I said, maybe I wasn't ready for that. Like I wasn't ready to take that in. But I think something internally in me started to shift and change. And I remember back then there was like this question, this nagging question at the back of my head that just wouldn't let go. It was like, there has to be more to life than this. And I don't know where that question came from, but I don't think I don't think my teacher back then worded it like that, but it was just like, I was like, so I'm going to work from 9 to 5, and I'm going to do a good job, and I'm going to be really good at my profession, and then I'm going to get a house, and then I'm going to get married, and then I'm going to have kids. And I was like, something's missing, like something in this track that I was on, because I was very much on that track back then in my 20s. I was like, there's something missing here. There's I don't know, now I can maybe philosophize around that, but I didn't have a context back then how to think about this question that was kind of in me. That could be like one of the reasons why I eventually, in my late 20s, I was 29 when I took a sabbatical from my work, and kind of, took a deep dive. But later on, obviously, after studying more, and when my practice kind of shifted and adding meditation to it, and a little bit more like, or a lot more context around that. Yeah, of course it is. I don't see my practice and life like two separate things. I always, or the way I teach these days, there's always an overlap. There always needs to be like what we do on the mat. You have to be able to apply that in life, or when I design a class, or what I want to teach is often influenced like what's happening in the world, or what's happening in our lives, or what is the season we in. So how can I make what we do on the mat really, really relevant to like day-to-day life?
Yeah, I think that's such something I focus on as well, is off the mat. The practice on the mat is important, but it's off the mat where it really it marinates and it presents itself. And when you're able to kind of use some of those mindfulness techniques or some of the yamas and niyamas, or just the ability to cultivate more stillness, I mean, there's so many gifts, I think, that come from the practice. Is that kind of what you're referring to as well?
I'm referring to that, and yeah, yeah. I guess my recent obsession has been a lot around, like, I've done quite a bit of study in the last couple of years into nervous system. And so a lot of the things, like, we can talk about philosophy and I like when it starts to kind of click together, that some of the things that I have learned either about yoga philosophy or Taoism or Buddhism, and then you kind of start to see, and now when studying about our biology, like our basic physical reactions, I'm like, okay, so there's also like a very kind of like a scientific, very tangible application of that. So what I mean by that is for example, when we talk about nervous system, then our ability to be present in the moment has to do with our nervous system capacity, our nervous system's resilience, to be here, and this is something that we can train. This is something that we inherently have. Every one of us has a very unique nervous system patterning, but you can change that. Just like there's neuroplasticity, our brain patterns can change. It's a similar thing with our nervous system. That's just one example, and that's really empowering. And my mind really how do I say it? Like, I really like when there's these two worlds that are coming together, that like the spiritual side of it kind of comes together with the science or the biology. And there's like several ways and several levels that you can look at things, and how you can also then offer it out, or how you can teach it. So that's also what really excites me.
Oh my gosh, me too. The nervous system, and how the parasympathetic or sympathetic are activated, and what yoga can do for not just, as people usually think, the musculoskeletal system of our body or cardiovascular, but what yoga can offer to our endocrine system, our GI system, even our respiratory or reproductive. Like, it's all connected, and it's something I really enjoy digging into as well. It just goes on and on and on what we can learn.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would love to also talk a little bit about yin yoga here, because I know there's so many benefits for activating the nervous system as well. Kind of turning off that sympathetic relationship or sympathetic nervous system response, and kind of activate more of the parasympathetic for rest and digest with yin yoga. So I know you've practiced Kundalini, Vinyasa, and other types of yoga as well. And it seems like yin yoga has really where your heart lies. So can you tell our listeners about your love for yin yoga, and also talk about what is the essence of yin yoga?
Maybe a little comment from that, like something that might be interesting to people maybe who are just starting out, or when there's like all these different styles and things like that. As I said, like, I initially didn't know that there were even different styles of yoga, and it was somewhere along the way that I started to kind of explore. And that mentality that I had, that I spoke about in my late 20s, well, all throughout my 20s, this like no pain, no gain mentality a little bit that I applied in my work, that essentially burnt me out. And that's why I took a sabbatical, which I never returned from. But that's a longer story. But I took that mentality into my practice. And this is something that I really kind of want to point out, that sometimes yoga gets kind of like shown in this light of like this holy grail that you arrived, and then you start to do these practices and all of your problems will solve, and there's this shiny goal at the end of the path of enlightenment, and once you awaken you are whole and complete, and that picture. And in my experience, that's not true. All of my patterning that I had in my, I'm making air quotes, you can't see, in my previous life, that came right along with me onto my mat. So one of them being like perfectionism, for example. I love how Brene Brown talks about perfectionism. Like, we seem to think that perfectionism is something like us striving to be our best. And she points out that no, that's not what it is. It's a shield. It's like a shield that you lug around to protect yourself. And in fact, that shield is actually something, that weight of perfectionism is something that's actually preventing you from taking flight. And when I read that, I was just like, wow. And it's something that I've been tackling years and years and years. So I took that mentality with me into my practice. So doing the teacher training, and when I was in Australia during my sabbatical, and then continuing teaching and continuing practicing, I was very driven, like super disciplined and super driven. A lot of tapas, which is like this inner fire, this inner discipline. That same mentality came with me also to all of my meditation. So for like my first meditation retreat ever was a 10-day Vipassana. And the thing, what made me sign up for that was like, this is gonna be freaking hard. And that was like what lit everything up in me. Yeah, I need to put myself through that fire. And I'm not looking back and going, oh, well, that was wrong or bad, or I took a wrong path or something. No, I think that was all kind of like, it was part of my journey. Like, there was something in me that I kind of needed to burn through. But essentially, there was this breakthrough moment for me about 5-6 years into my practice and teaching. Well, it was into my teaching, and I had been practicing for about 10 years by that time. When I kind of saw through it, it was like this glimpse of a moment where I went like, hang on, who's practicing here? And it was my strong willpower. You can call it ego. I don't do the ego bashing thing either, but it was my strong willpower, the willpower that the part of me that was already really, really strong was practicing with me on the mat. Once I kind of saw through that, there was this quite a period of free fall, because I didn't really know, where do you move from when I don't move from that perfectionist, got to get it right, got to improve, got to fix myself. When I don't move from that mindset, like, where do I move from? And I think it was Yin came in around that time. And I think I had really good teachers. My first workshop was with Sarah Powers, that just opened my eyes to a different mindset. And that's, in a long-winded way, that's how I'm now coming to what's the essence of Yin to me. So yeah, initially for me, Yin as well was like these long held postures, and it was also challenging. So I think that's also what drew me in, because my first Yin class, I didn't like it at all. I was like, my mind was the whole time judging and going, what the heck is this? And da 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 da. And I had my, old understanding of anatomy. Sometimes when you come to a practice and you have a baggage of knowledge, sometimes it can be an obstacle. So I was like, no, well, you're not supposed to do this and that. And once I was able to kind of set that aside a bit, I think it was again in the same way, like my first Kundalini, like my mind was resisting, but my body was saying like, yeah, we're onto something here. So I kept going. So the essence to me no longer is just like, oh, it's long held postures, and, there's health benefits to connective tissues, and all of that is there. But what excites me is the shift, as I said, the shift which I'm still working on. I think for me, it's going to be a lifelong path of how to be in this moment, allowing things to be as they are, which is not inaction, which is not being passive, but it is allowing for this moment of reflection and type of a surrender. But again, it's not like giving up. But before I jump in and go, like, I need to somehow fix what is, can I allow for what is? Like, can I really make space for that? And in life, of course, it includes also being with the whole range of human emotions and, life situations. It involves being with loss, being with pain, going into the darkness. On the mat, I don't advocate, going into pain, but we are in a yin practice, we are being with a certain amount of discomfort. Like it's partly there, right? And also for some people, simply being still is new and somewhat uncomfortable. So that's, their edge. And so that's the kind of that interplay that I again kind of excites me, because we live in a yin deficient world, right? Like when we look, and we've come, actually, maybe I need to rephrase that, because after our 2 year of lockdowns, not lockdowns, like for a lot, like that's a big yin phase for the whole world, and for some people this has been a big moment of stopping and pausing, and for others not, because then on top of your work, homeschooling your kids and all of that. So I'm not going to assume what this period has been for people, but in general, I think we live in a yin deficient world, and a lot of our actions out in the world are not grounded in our deepest essence. And that's why we find ourselves in situations we in, whether it's in our individual lives or in our collective lives. And so I know it sounds a little bit maybe grand, but like deep down, that's what motivates me, is if we are able to connect to ourselves more deeply, be in our discomfort, turn towards like our own wounding, our own past that has not been integrated. Like all of that to me is turning towards yin. And so then an action that can arise from that space is an action that's grounded in yin. And I think my hope is that the actions that come from that deeper place of connecting to yourself are also actions that are not just for my benefit, but for the benefit of a wider good. So I often look at the spiritual practice for me these days is not just like with my own like spirit or my own depth, but I love this concept that comes from many indigenous cultures, and more like shamanic concept of like me connecting deeply is also starting to connect me to like horizontally, to my wider community of my fellow trees and animals and the winged ones and the four-leggeds and my mountains, and it's just like this whole life on earth. And so can you imagine like when we can tap into that, and not in our minds, but in our bodies, feel that connection. And I get teary-eyed when I talk about it, because that connection comes with quite a lot of grief for me, because of how we treating this wider community of ours is horrific, really. But can you imagine when we can start to kind of live from that place, that we viscerally feel that connection, and my actions, my decisions, my choices out in life come from that place? Like, it will be a different world. So yeah, a bit grand, but gotta aim high.
Oh, that was beautiful to hear you talk about, Liina. And I agree that we are in a yin deficient world. Although the pandemic has certainly, you're right, been a big cycle of yin, but it is, we're fast paced, we're consumers, we're go go go, think less, like in a way, think less, do more. Even though I know we all rely on our logic and our prefrontal cortex way too much to make our decisions, instead of going deep into our animal body. And I love that you also are a fan of Mary Oliver. I saw that in your newsletter, your quote for autumn being about the trees and turning into pillars of light. And uh, she's a gorgeous poet, and also I know passionate about the natural world, which you are as well.
Yeah, she's the best nature poet, I think. It's just it's the way she describes nature, and poetry is kind of a way to pass on something that can't be put into words, but there are these amazing beings from time to time who try that. And so it more kind of passes on a felt sense, an embodied experience. I find like good poetry tries to do that.
Yeah, there's so much reverence, I think, for in her words, and tenderness, and how she sees the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know maybe it's a little random, but I would love to ask Liina, what do you think is something people get wrong about yin yoga? Because I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there, or people just take some guesswork into it. So I thought that'd be fun to ask you.
To me, it's not passive. There's so much happening, even though it seems like nothing's happening. And there's so much that you can find out about yourself. And I think sometimes I see it practiced in a very with a kind of a young mindset. Is that 5 minutes? I have the 5 minutes on the clock, and I'm going to be here, and I'm not going to move. And that kind of misses the point. Like there needs to be this gentle dance with your own limits, with your own interior, and it just needs to have that tender, compassionate inquiry with it. I find for me, for it to kind of have the effect that it that it has, the potential that it has. But of course, when I say this, like I can really kind of remember. I used to kind of approach it like that a little bit in the beginning. So maybe it's just like this process, and I also like really encourage people to. Mm, this is what we try to do with our yin training. I'm doing a teacher training together with a good friend and colleague of mine, Valerie Hartwich. And we are absolutely not interested in like creating teachers who think exactly like us and who teach exactly like us. Like absolutely no. Like at the very core of our training, whether these are people who are just passionate about yin or whether they want to become teachers, at the core of it is for everyone to find out for themselves like what yin means to them. Yes, there's this universal, we can talk about Taoism, and we can talk about like yin and yang theory and all of that, but I think it will start to have a true meaning to you, where you can kind of see like what is your relationship, how do you interpret that, where does that show up in your life, and then it becomes like this very alive inquiry. So there's not one right answer, how what yin is, or what it can give. And it also is something that, well, as I've seen in my own practice, it changes over time. So obviously that's going to be also true for everyone else. So it's good to kind of check in from time to time, be a little bit more bold in not just relying on what someone is telling you how it is or how it should be, or again, that it doesn't get dogmatic, because the core teachers are not dogmatic. Like, that's what I love about it, is like Paul Grilly is absolutely not a dogmatic teacher. That's the lineage where my teachers come from. Neither is Sarah Powers. And so that's what I love about this lineage, that there is a lot of room for interpretation and application.
And I also appreciate that experimentation in yoga, where you're really you are the quote unquote, yeah, like yogi scientist, right? Where you're just trying to figure out, okay, what am I feeling? Is this really the right alignment for my body and the way my bones are put together? There's so much that's so individual. And I think we have to be careful as yoga teachers to not be teaching to quote unquote like one body, to each individual.
Yeah, I think that's a big maybe change that Yin Yoga has brought to the wider yoga community as well, and Paul Grilly's work on human skeletal variation, and it's now everywhere. Obviously skeletal variation is not limited, like only when you practice Yin. It's whatever you practice, and it's a big shift when you start to make that shift from a very strict, like, alignment based practicing or teaching, to trying to get people to feel into their own specific, unique bodies. But I think that's necessary, or at least that's how I orient. So it's not just in my Yin practice, but it's also in my movement-based, more flowy practices. It's similar. Creating a container. It's not saying that I'm not saying alignment doesn't matter. I'm not saying that do whatever you want. I'm not saying that either. So there is certain information that I have about body that I can pass on, but it's definitely not that your toes need to be pointed that way and your knee needs to be on top of blah blah blah, all of that. And it is trickier to teach like that, in this way, to get people to interested and curious and feeling into what's actually there, and not instructing, but kind of facilitating. Yeah, it's been also a journey to kind of find ways how to bring that into group classes.
Yeah, it involves a lot of unlearning, for me at least, a lot of unlearning. Because in the US, where I first started learning yoga, you hear the same phrases on repeat. Don't let your knee go past your ankle. Different things about alignment where you just think, oh, that must be true. There's so much unlearning. And I know that Bernie Clark has amazing books out there with Your Spine, Your Yoga, and a guide on Yin Yoga. And he's been just incredible in my process of unlearning. And Liina, I've heard you mention before that yoga can be a spiritual bypass, which is magnified in our current times. And I know we kind of talked a little bit about being careful of viewing yoga as the Holy Grail and, being a little bit more mindful. But I would love to hear more about you talking about how yoga can be a spiritual bypass.
What I would be careful with is when, as I said, when yoga is kind of offered as is this all-in-one cure, or when yoga is talked about in terms of only light and bliss, and as if that's the goal, as if that's where we're heading, is that our practice at one point is going to take us to a place where we'll be blissful and happy all the time, high vibes only type of a mentality. And I bought into that for a bit. I would really kind of it's that similar kind of track that I went down on before, like what really got me excited about yin and this wider interpretation of yin, of life, including like my whole humanness. is welcomed and is okay. And so my practice is not about shutting parts of me down and then using my kind of using my practice as a way to do that. So basically my practice, like, even to a point, like my practice always trying to get me to a place of calm and some neutrality. So even with equanimity, for example, like, was it, I was really happy to hear, was it Sharon Salzberg, who's a Buddhist teacher, and she was also defining it, equanimity, not like this kind of static place of calm where nothing in the world, what happens, can really faze me, and I'm always like centered. And she was more saying in a similar way, like I was saying before about nervous system, like being able to be with fluctuations of life, being able to allow different emotions, and then the capacity to hold that. Also, to me, that doesn't mean that I'm always calm. I get angry, and anger is a very necessary emotion that ignites and creates change. And then, yes, I'm sad and I'm grieving when I'm losing something that I care about. Like, as I said before, I'm feeling grief every day when I admire the beauty of nature, and then, when I see cruelty against animals, I feel sad and I feel grief because I care. Um, and so I'm not trying to like hide from those feelings, or somehow my practice is not about like trying to get away from those feelings into my nice, placid, calm state. But it actually is for me to be able to feel them, not get stuck in them. Someone was describing, I love that description of emotions, them being like tunnels that you move through, and it becomes a problem when you get stuck in that tunnel. And that's also like the stuff of body keeping score, like things that we haven't been able to feel through get stored in the body. There's a lot of that from our past that lives in our body. So all of that concept, all of those ideas as well. But yeah, so that's basically one way that I think about it and feel about it, that my practice is not about avoiding life. It's not about transcendence. Like I feel myself like it's important in these days that as many of us start to kind of slowly, step by step, waking up while we're living our lives, while we are out in the world. And it's not that model of I'm on a mountaintop and meditating and withdrawing from the world, which, some people's path that is. But I think, again, the current state that we're in needs people waking up in their lives in this world, and making change. And in order to make change, as I said, like, anger is a spark. Like, you don't want to be fueled by anger. You don't want to like drive all the way through with anger through your action, because that's a very depleting way to do things. But you kind of like, you need that spark, right? So each of these emotions, like, they have their function. They activate something in us. And so my practice is more like recognizing that. And also for my own personal practice, talking about anger, is like, I need to make a relationship with that, because I've grown up with a story that anger is bad and I'm not supposed to feel it. And for me to actually would be very easy to play this calm spiritual person game, because I have a lot of calm in me, and sometimes I kind of actually need to work on that opposite of like lighting that fire a little bit more.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that's it's fantastic awareness, and I also have had an interesting relationship with anger. So as like Thich Nhat Hanh says, it's something to embrace like a child. So to really be very tender with those feelings that we really want to avoid, ignore, run away from, as you said, embrace the entire human experience and really see if you can hold those parts like a child, like a mother with a very tender, I'm here, I'm listening. What are you telling me? What do I learn? I really have I come along. I feel like I've come a long way. I'd like to say that, but I think I've made progress at least, and I found a lot of solace with Thich Nhat Hanh's words. So at this point, Liina, I ask this question to every single guest. It's the last tough one, I hope. What is your definition of yoga?
You leave the good one for the last. I can have a short one. It's moving with awareness is how I often think about like my movement based or kind of like asana based practices that I teach, is moving with awareness. And of course, we can, same like with yin, yoga is not simply your asana practice. There's a whole wide field. Yeah, but I think I can't say it better, like even out in the world, actually. It's like moving with awareness is there's a certain alignment where my intentions, my thoughts, my actions begin to align. And there is a type of oneness when that happens, and it's not as simple as it sounds, because also part of the unearthing and part of our practice is part of that awareness building is to become more and more aware of like what are these undercurrents, like what are these things that are actually pulling the strings below your conscious awareness, because that what actually matters, and what shapes how you act and what choices you make. And so it's kind of like this slow, patient peeling away of layers is part of your practice, part of your self inquiry. Is why am I really doing this, and not just letting that surface level why, the beautiful why that we present to the world, and even like why you practice. I've just been through 6-month mentorship course with Naomi Absalom called Liberate, and it was amazing. And a lot of the things that we looked at was exactly that, like what goes below the radar. Yes, I have a beautiful story here why I practice yoga or why I chose to become a teacher, but there's usually something underneath that. And so sitting with that and becoming more aware of that is actually when again, similarly, as I was saying, when I become aware of those undercurrents, when they come to the light of consciousness, is then I truly can, then that's when I truly have actually choice. That's when I actually truly have freedom to make choices that, I don't have these strings being pulled by something, from my past or any of those hidden agendas there. And it's not as if those hidden agendas are kind of evil, but what I mean is they will influence on how we act in the world, or as a teacher, it will influence what I will bring in the room with me, how I project out to other people, my need for validation or those sorts of things. So yeah, short definition would be moving with awareness, like greater awareness. And then, yeah, you had a long-winded one after that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was the short and the long were perfect. Have you heard of Moxie? Are you experiencing Zoom fatigue? Join me on Moxie for live streamed yoga classes complete with warm up and cool down rooms. I'm teaching morning yoga classes and leading yoga challenges here in January, and I'd love for you to join me. Moxie is the leading fitness online platform where you can work out with coaches and trainers or take yoga classes with teachers like me, online or through the app. Head over to moxie.xyz/wild yoga tribe to get started. That's moxie.xyz/wild yoga tribe. There's a link in the show notes or on my website. See you there. And also, I love to focus a little bit on Estonia, on the country you're actually from. Could you tell our listeners what Estonia is like, what it's known for? We'll just kind of pretend they really know nothing about it. They might be experts on Estonia, I don't know, but let's just pretend that we're speaking to people with very little awareness.
Estonia is a tiny country. We only have 1.4 million people, and it's about the size of, I don't know, Netherlands or Switzerland. So if you think, like, I always draw that comparison that I think Netherlands has like 17 million people or something, and so we only have 1.4. So a lot of space in a sense, like in the countryside. A lot of the people live in the capital. Tallinn is the capital. We are north, so we like to cluster ourselves part of Northern Europe. Often we get clustered with Eastern Europe because of our history, being part of Soviet Union for 50 years. But I think our temperament is much more closer to like Finnish people and Scandinavians. So we can be a bit slower. uh, to a point of stoic, quite introverted, and kind of the first appearance can sometimes be that we are a bit like cold. But I think once you kind of get to know us, I'm hoping that we come across as quite open-hearted, I hope. I was just there this weekend, and what are we known for? Skype was invented by Estonians, then at some point got sold. So we are very technologically advanced in a sense that when I'm in Germany right now, or when I'm dealing with bureaucracy in Italy, oh my God, it drives me crazy because everything is like you can do everything over internet in Estonia, from voting to like any bureaucracy that you need to do. So it's kind of like modernized in that sense, because we started very fresh in the 90s when we got our independence, and there were kind of young people running the country and building the capitalism, I guess, after communism. And so we kind of started everything from scratch, got a head start on the technology front. So I think that's one thing. And I was back. I hadn't been back for 2 years, and I really recommend visiting Tallinn, because I was like a tourist in my own city. There's a whole new part of town. I was amazing by the sea, and like these really innovative ideas. I was really kind of proud to walk around, and I was like, yeah, everybody should come and visit. Maybe from a yoga perspective, as I said, like when I started, there were no yoga centers. That's 25 years ago, and there might be something in gyms and somewhere in the back rooms or cellars somewhere. And now, of course, there's yoga studios everywhere. So there's like everywhere else in the world, there's lots on offer.
Do you think there's anything about your culture so focused on, technology or innovation, or, with the history in the USSR, if there's anything, do you feel that yoga is particularly relevant, supported by or challenged by in Estonia? I think that it's so needed by the US because of that fast-paced go, 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 do, buy, create, go, go, go. It's like this just insane pace of expectation. And I think people are just going really seeking yoga and seeking meditation and becoming more and more, almost craving it in a way. I know that word is loaded, craving, but I think that my culture is craving yoga because it's just, we're exhausted.
Yeah, but you got to be careful because a lot of the yoga that's offered, as I was saying before, like a lot of the yoga that's offered is actually catering for a very similar mindset of like achievement and aesthetics and looking in a certain way or achieving a certain goal. And that's you know that can that's what I often try to point out, because I've done that in my own journey. Is often we choose who said that we choose the practice that enforces our neurosis. I don't remember who said that, but it's basically says that we're going to gravitate towards a practice that is going to strengthen something that's already strong within us. So whether it's a meditation practice or whether it's a physical practice. So kind of like having that in mind when we like get really obsessed about like a certain lineage or a certain way of practicing is just being mindful of that. Is this really kind of creating an even stronger groove in something that's already a strong in me? So as I said, like initially, like this perfectionist aspect in me, like I had it, this inner disciplinary. I was like, yep, I've got my whip. I'm here. I'm on it. And so for years, I was actually like kind of drilling that part in me that was already strong. And yeah, so and as I said, there's this just calling some awareness around that and not saying that that path was wrong. Back then, probably that was just the only path that I was able to take. That was something that got me hooked, and that's good. But having more teachers who have maybe awareness around that and can have the capacity, the way they teach, like bring these things and themes and inquiries along into the teaching rather than, dogmatic teaching that has been very, very prevalent in the decades that yoga has been present in the West. I think it's good to kind of raise awareness around that.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And I do think that first, what is attractive to a lot of people is what aligns with their own neuroses, as you said. And it's the gateway. I know even the gateway can be Instagram, seeing beautiful bendy pretzels and saying, I want to be like that, or I don't know. There's so many different gateways, whether it's the gym and a tightness, whether it's an injury, whether it's insomnia. And I think people are gravitating towards what's most popular, we see the most, what aligns most with our own kind of dosha or our own inclinations, and patterns. But I think it is part of that journey as well to just to become more aware of that. I think that's part of yoga is self-awareness. And I think that I was very similar to you. I am very similar. That disciplinary and that whip, that tapas, it resonates for sure. And to be more mindful about, okay, is this serving me or is this serving the part of me that I don't think serves me actually? It's kind of a mental Jenga, but it's something I think about a lot as well. So I'm grateful that that's something that you're bringing to light for our listeners.
Well, as we also how we show ourselves in social media. I mean, I'm conflicted about the whole social media anyway. It's a constant struggle for me. But there lies a certain as you were saying, like the depiction, like the main kind of view that is right now out there of like what yoga is very, like, for me, it's very alienating and it's very incomplete and very body centered and actually quite kind of alarming in a sense. And so having more teachers somehow take on the role of, I don't know if popularizing is the right word, but bringing voice to other aspects of it is really important. That's what I've been really lucky with here in Berlin. Like the teachers that I can sometimes get a bit misguided in that sense, that thinking that, oh yeah, we're doing great in the yoga world, because I'm really guided with very progressively thinking, smart, switched on teachers here, where we constantly talk about these topics and discuss it, and it's really healthy as teachers to be thinking about these things and not just kind of following, oh, well, everyone is doing this. So then I feel pressured as well that, oh, I got to, go and do the photo shoot and post on Instagram and, do these things. And I'm like going, hang on, no, that doesn't align with how I feel about this practice. And sometimes that's hard because it's taking you off kind of this. You might lose some. What I'm saying is, like, you might lose some people, you might lose some followers. But again, that can't be, for me. That can't be what I focus on. So I'm kind of honing all of those fear, or when those fear bubbles pop up. Seeing what the popular teachers are doing, or whatever, and then trying to really kind of come back and go, hang on, stop. What are you actually, who you are? What is it that you want to offer? Get clear about that, and then stay true to that, and keep checking in, keep checking in. I love, again, that idea that authenticity is not, it's not something you have. It's not that I'm authentic and that person is not authentic, but authenticity is a process. And so it's something that, I either prioritize and engage in, or I don't. And so I'm either practicing authenticity or I don't, but it's not something I have or don't have. And in order to practice authenticity, I kind of need to have that self-reflection there from moment to moment, from from day to day type of a thing. Yeah, checking in.
I love hearing you say check in and check in, because it reminds me so much of Lama Yeshe Rinpoche. Check up, check up. He says it was in a book that I read of his, and we were studying at a meditation retreat in, I think that one was in India at Tushita. So it's always good to have a good reminder to check in, check up. And so, Liina, I'm sure our listeners have just loved hearing your perspective and what you embody and offer. So would you talk to, or just let them know where they can find you online or in person, and what kind of offerings you have? Of course, I will link to everything in our show notes, as well as on my website, wildyogatribe.com, but just letting them know would be great.
I think everything is on my website, and it's simple. It's liinayoga.com. Liina is with 2 I's. And that's how we spell it in Estonia. So everything should be there. I do quite a bit online these days. So I have a few kind of classes that I've kept and going to keep online, whether we open up or not. And I think the most kind of exciting thing that is coming up is that yin training, yin teacher training, or yin immersion that I mentioned earlier on, that I hold together with my friend and co-teacher Valerie, who's a fascia expert. And so we're bringing in many different kind of facets. I think you already got that we interpret yin in a very broad way, and we trying to give a very broad scope of our own experience, but then also facilitating and guiding each person's own reflections and inquiries around like what's yin for them and how they want to bring it into whatever field they in. And and then each year I have a couple of retreats in Italy, and hopefully again next year again in Estonia. So if anyone got excited about Estonia with its a lot of space and emptiness around you, then that's usually in August every year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Liina, for joining me today.
Thanks, Lily. It was great talking to you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. My conversation with Liina Tael, a yoga teacher from Estonia, was so beautiful as we delved into Liina's journey with yoga. From a mindset of no pain, no gain, and work hard, play hard, to a place of tenderness and self-inquiry and the essence of yin yoga. I hope our conversation made you curious about becoming curious yourself about yourself and about your own individual experience with yoga in your body, energy, and emotions. I also loved how Liina offered up gentle warnings about looking towards yoga as a holy grail or as a spiritual bypass. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Wild Yoga Tribe podcast. Be well. Thank you for the gift of your attention today. If you feel called, please share this episode with someone who you think could benefit from it. Leaving a review would also be so appreciated. Also, I hope you can join me for a yoga class on Moxie and take advantage of that $25 off coupon here in January. I'm doing morning yoga classes 5 times a week, including Rise and Shine yoga classes and even classes for people who say they can't do yoga. Links are in the show notes or on my website, wildyogatribe.com. See you there. And as always, be well, dear one, be well.